Hi, I'm Bill Patton, Infinite Vision Coach, and it's my distinct pleasure to have Jack Broudy on the show. But let me tell you a little bit about myself. I am a senior contributor with SportsEdTV.com, the #1 sports training website in the world. Also, I'm the author of The Athlete-Centered Coach, and also, bias alert, I'm an early adopter of the Jack Broudy teaching system. I was exposed to his teachings in the mid-90s, so I'm one of the true believers. But I'm going to try to be as balanced and objective as I can be, but you should know that. And I also subscribe to Jack teaching subscription that was offered in the early 2010s, and that was use that as a staff training module with the staff as I was a director of tennis. And then also I list Jack as one of the top 5 influences on my teaching when you also consider Tom Stowe, Dick Gould, Tim Galloway, and Jim Lair. All right, Jack, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself, how long in the game, some of the players you've introduced to the system, and a little bit about the history of the system.
My introduction to the game was pretty normal. Dad was playing, so I started playing. And then time went on. I played college junior tennis. But coaching was my thing. I started coaching good players when I was about 22 years old, right out of college. And this system came to me actually after I was coaching some great players. I was working with a kid named Steve Foreman, who was #1 in the country, and Eric Riley won the Orange Bowl, and a few others. And then I wrote this book called The Real Spin on Tennis. And someone approached me with this idea of nonlinear motion. And Rudolf Steiner, if anyone wants to Google him, he's an interesting cat from the mid-1800s, Rudolf Steiner. And he talks all about this spatial dynamics and sort of the science of infinity, curves, spirals, mazes of all kinds. And I found it fascinating. And so even though I had just finished my book, The Real Spin on Tennis, which this guy really liked, but he said, oh, you might like some of this Rudolf Steiner stuff. I was going to do a book tour. I didn't even want to do a book tour. I was so quickly over my book that took me 3 years to write. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, boy, see ya. No interest in this anymore. So it was funny. I had a book out, but I wouldn't even push it because I was so into this idea of nonlinear motion, what the great athletes and natural athletes do intuitively, like a shortstop versus every other player on the baseball team, right? The shortstop's the only guy on the team who's a good enough athlete to catch and throw in the same motion, where everyone else has to catch, turn, throw. So I really got into this whole thing, and I left whatever I was doing, all my series of tips and drills that I had in my original book in the mid-90s, and I left it all quickly to take courses up there where you are in Northern California at the Steiner College up there. He has like 60 colleges throughout the world.
Okay. We're going to talk a little bit about the pain involved in playing a linear game. So where are the pain points of people who go out there and they're linear all day long? That's the way they were taught. This is the way they're playing and trying to learn. Where does it go wrong?
Well, yeah, they're told to either load up or finish by pointing their elbow someplace or, point at the ball. I just call them tips and drills. Tips and drills alone don't work. And so we have a philosophy. And I guess the pain point is you get stuck, right? And that's the problem. Tennis players they're like anything else, like any business, grow or die. And you want to keep improving. But in general, most people hit a level very early on. It's a 3.0 level or a 4.0 level, or if the better athletes, maybe a 4.5 level. That's about it. And then unless you take it very seriously, you don't get much higher than that. So I guess the pain points are they're not improving. And I've always thought the H factor was the biggest, the humiliation factor. I mean, imagine going out there and playing doubles with your friends on the weekend and you double fault 3 or 4 times in one game. You don't really, it's like time to play pickleball because it's just too humiliating. And I think that's a big problem with tennis. People don't want to be embarrassed out there. And I think tennis tennis is an easy place where that can happen.
All right. And so, how does linear tennis play into injuries like tennis elbow and, various acute injuries of all of a sudden you tweaked your back or your neck or something?
Sure.
How does linear tennis play into these injuries?
That's a good question. Linear tennis, whether they tell you to get your racket back early or whether they tell you to rotate your shoulders, either way, it's a linear motion, right? It's a straight motion, and if you use your arm, that's probably a little worse. But the shoulders is just as off balance because this is not the center of your body. This is not your core, right? Your core is down in your hips. Mm-hmm. And you rarely hear about anyone, unless they're a very good pro, you rarely hear about that because you don't see much motion in the hips. So most people see the racket moving quickly. So they tell you, oh, racket head speed, swing faster, but they don't realize that it comes throughout this ripple of your body, kind of like a bullwhip, where you move your hands slowly, but because of nature and the laws of, it's called the law of conservation, to be really boring. And the law of conservation says that the heavier part of this whip, when I move it slowly, it has to conserve the same energy as it gets to the lighter, thinner parts of the whip. So it moves quicker and tighter, and it creates speed at the end. So it's not like you're trying to create racket.
Let me break in there for a second. And so then because people aren't using the law of conservation, then the energy goes in the wrong places and they end up hurting themselves. So now, as we go into the next clip, I mean, really what this is about is it's about educating people. And if we look at the word education and its Latin root educos, which means to draw from within, then what you're going to see, I think, in Jack's course and in the rest of this video is the experiential learning that happens. It's not something where somebody gives you one tip and then you do that one thing. It's a principle, and then you grow into the principle. You start to make it your own. Does that capture that pretty well?
Yeah. It's not that tips in themselves are wrong. They're just woefully incomplete. That's all. It's not that they're wrong. Like when someone says, throw your left hand back on a backhand or serve on your knees. Well, those are okay tips, but unless you serve on your knees facing the 45-degree angle, meaning the net post, or unless you throw your left hand back, not locking you sideways, but locking you at this, once again, this 45-degree angle I talk about, well, then the tip makes sense. Then the tip makes sense. But if they just say, throw your left hand back, unless you're a great athlete, you could throw it back in a million different places and it might not work so well.
Okay, very good. So that makes a tremendous segue into the next clip, which we're about to get into. We're going to talk about the pain points related to the contact point. Where is an ideal contact point? And, how can you practice that? What are the things that you do to approach that place? And, Jack already alluded to it. It's approximately at the 45-degree angle. All right, so we're going to see you in the next clip. Thank you, Jack.